Let me just introduce myself real quick. My name is Dr. Guiroy. I am a first-year resident in psychiatry at LAC so University of Southern California. And I am from Monterey Bay in Salinas, so a couple hours north of here. I went to Wellesley College for undergrad. I majored in neuroscience and art history. I was pre-med, and then the classes were really hard. And second semester junior year, I actually dropped pre-med. I decided I wanted to do something else. And then that's when also the economy slumped pretty hard. So I ended up going home, and I worked as a receptionist at a surgeon's office for a couple of months before I realized that I definitely did still want to be a doctor, even though I had changed my mind the year prior, and I ended up enrolling in a post-bac program. So in order to go to medical school, as I'm sure you know, you have to take a certain number of classes, like organic chemistry, like certain math classes, English classes. So I had not completed all those requirements in college. So I did a post-bac program where I took organic chemistry and physics. I took the MCAT. And during that time I was doing research at UCSF in healthy aging and memory. And then I also actually got involved in a tech startup company. So I actually worked in tech for a couple of years while I was going through all of this. And I ended up having to apply to medical school twice. So I did not get in the first time. I probably did not apply to enough safety schools. And then the second time, my husband actually got into school in Boston. So I moved from San Francisco to Boston. And while I was there, I was doing research, and I was also like tutoring and doing other things to kind of make some money. I reapplied to medical school. I got in, and I went to Albany Medical College in upstate New York. And while I was at Albany Medical College, they offered me to do a master's in bioethics for free, and I said yes, I would love a free master's. So between my third and fourth year of medical school, I took a year off to do a master's in bioethics. I've completed all my coursework, but I still haven't finished my thesis, so I'm working on that. And then I matched in psychiatry. So I really loved mental health, and it's really what I wanted to do. And so now today is my last day of clinical work as an intern. So I am almost a second year. So that's a little bit about me.
Cool. Thanks. So it sounds like you did a lot. You went through a lot to get to where you are, and that's really cool because I think a lot of our students might identify themselves with that experience. So that's really cool. What skills or experiences do you think best prepared you for medical school? I know you had a lot, but what do you think?
Yeah, so I think one of the most important things that you can do for yourself is try to figure out if you actually want to be a doctor, because there are a lot of different jobs in the healthcare system. There isn't just being a doctor. There's also a nurse practitioner. There's like respiratory therapy. There are people who are on the business side. Health is a huge space. Being a physician isn't the only way. It's just a specific role that you play. And so I did a ton of volunteer work. That's also something that really makes a difference on your application, because they want to see medical school. Applying to medical school is really hard. Medical school is really hard. And even residency is really hard, and also the life of a physician. There's some really great moments, but a lot of times it can also just be a lot of a crush, really. So I think it's important for you to be able to know that this is really worth it. And I think that really helped me in medical school. As you can tell, I was a non-traditional student. I started a little bit later, but I think that the fact that I had done a lot of volunteer work and I'd actively chosen to go into medicine rather than it being kind of like path of least resistance, I think I had a good idea that this was worth it. So when I was up at like 3 o'clock in the morning, or when I was missing weddings and funerals, so that I could be in school and do what I had to do, it was worth it to me. And I was able to kind of get me through some of the harder times. So I think the thing that prepared me the best was either kind of working in the healthcare space, doing a lot of volunteer work where you're doing a lot of patient interaction. So not just like, sometimes they make volunteers just like fold papers or pass things up, but actually talking to patients. That helped me write my my essays, both for medical school, for my postdoc program, but also for residency, where I specifically had stories that inspired me about my patients that drove me to decide to pursue this. Because I think that connection that you get with people and this like time of need is really powerful, and is also kind of the thing that will always be with you if you decide to become a physician. So I think volunteering, and then also getting a chance to talk to a lot of people in different healthcare fields, and you know, was the sacrifice worth it? And is this actually the role that you want to play as a care provider?
Awesome. So we know you just mentioned that you had applied to medical school twice. What do you think made a difference with the first and the second time? And what was that process like in general?
Yeah, so to kind of backtrack a little bit, I think the number one most important thing with applying to medical school is your grades. That's just the reality of it. You have to have excellent grades. Like you need A's and B's. So for me, I got like a C plus in an advanced chemistry class, and I think I got also a C in an organic chemistry class that I took in junior year. And I think that obviously, like I'm a doctor now, you can survive that, you'll move on. But then you have to kind of work on that hurdle and have really good scores. Because the reality is a lot of people want to go to medical school. A lot of people are really smart, but medical school is a lot of test taking. It's a lot of academics, and you have to learn a lot. It's like drinking out of a fire hose, but not just the water that you swallow, also the water that's on the ground. You need to know that too. So I think that it's with good reason, your grades need to be really good. So I think the difference between the first and second time is that the first time I think a little bit too ambitious. I applied to a lot of MD PhD programs that were like very, very competitive. And the second time I applied to a lot, like a huge range of schools. Also, neither of my parents are native English speakers. So that meant that writing essays, and you have to write like all these little things about all the different activities that you did. I personally worked a lot on my own writing skills, and then also had to find peers or just anyone that I could get to help me with that process of writing better essays. So I think the second time I had a significantly better essay. I'd also taken a lot more classes to improve my GPA and to show like, look, like I can get A's regularly, please let me in. I think that's another one that I did. I decided to not retake the MCAT because would have been too much of a time commitment, and I didn't think that I would be able to improve my score substantially enough. And my score was fine, it was pretty good, but wasn't amazing. And then I also did a lot of research, and so I've gotten a lot of letters of recommendations, and I actually had been working at Harvard and a couple other places to kind of like boost everything up as much as I could. Am I saying that you have to do those things? No, but I think if you're kind of starting out with a little bit of an untraditional path, they need to be able to see that you're committed with a lifetime commitment. And so I did volunteer work. I shared how everything that I was doing was relevant to health. I worked on improving my grades and my GPA with taking more classes. And then I also made sure that my essays were really good. And I applied to a much broader range, so a lot of safety schools.
How many medical schools does a typical student apply to, and how much versus how many you applied to?
That's a good question. It's been a couple of years, so I don't really remember. I think I ultimately applied to maybe 58 schools, and to be clear, I got a single interview.
Wow.
So I know other people who got like 12 interviews or 3 interviews. I got 1 interview, and then I nailed that interview, and that's where I ended up going. And it was a really rough experience because I even interviewed towards the end of the cycle, and but that was really important, and I made it really clear I really wanted this, and I put my whole life on hold for this, and I practiced and practiced and practiced for the interview. And my dad always says, like, finding a spot in a program is like trying to get a parking spot. Like, it's nice if there's tons of parking spots open, but you really just need 1 parking spot. So that helped me kind of keep my chin up through this really tough time.
What was that interview experience like for you?
Yeah, so usually you interview with 2 or 3 people, usually 3. I interviewed with only 2 people. And basically they ask a lot of questions about your experiences. So you can't just say like, oh, you know, I did research. They want to know, like, do you actually have a commitment to this? Do you know what you're talking about? Like, you have to be able to talk about the research that you did. or if I did volunteer work in, like I did volunteer work in the Philippines on HIV/AIDS awareness and prevention. So I like worked with dog workers and with teenagers and with all this other stuff. So I went and I was able to really talk about these things, but then also show how it applied to medicine, and also showed like I've been interested in this for a really long time. This isn't something that I just thought of yesterday. So if you're able to kind of show like these are the things that I've done, this is how it's relevant, and are able to talk about what specifically you did and how it influences you today, I think that can make you do very well in interviews, and you will interview again, like for residencies, but later on for jobs. So having good interview skills is something that will pay off no matter what path you choose.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. So how far in advance do you think our students should expect to apply right now? So typically a student will be transferring in as a junior. Some may have their volunteer experience. Some may have, maybe a few will have research experience done before they transfer. But what is the timeline, and how far should they apply?
Yeah, so it really depends on you. I think one of the things that's hard about applying to medical school is that, I just double checked this. So because residency programs start in July, the entire year system is shifted over early. So what that means is that applications, I think, at MCAT, they open in about June, and then it's rolling. So even though like the deadline is November, they will take and give interview slots, and as they run out, then they run out. So you want to apply as early as possible in the cycle, so the most possible slots are open. This is true for residency and for fellowship. So this is true for as you go through your entire journey. So what I ended up doing is so some people, they apply junior year, they have all their ducks in a row, they have all their applications ready, they have all their letters. And so they applied junior year so that by the time that they finished with college, they go straight into medical school. That was clearly not my path. So I ended up and I know a lot of people who end up just taking junior year, and they do research and kind of do other things in the meantime, and then they apply to medical school. So there's kind of a gap year. And that's actually fairly typical. But also, for example, in my residency program this year, we have a lot of people who are non-traditional, who are a little bit older. So there's actually only one person, there's only 2 people out of 12 that went straight through. So, also having life experience is often a plus, even later on, even with dealing with patient interactions. But also some people just kind of want to bang it through and get on with their lives, and I get that. So my suggestion is make sure that when you apply, since it's a big commitment, that you have great scores, right? That you have great grades, that your essays are really good, and you have excellent letters of recommendation. So you can start junior year, but just remember you should basically be in a place where by around July you can hit the submit button.
Thanks. What did you do to prepare for the MCATs?
So okay. So I'm gonna be honest with you. I am more of a humanities person. I love the sciences. I love scientific research, but physics and math and chemistry were not my passion, and that's okay because those are great foundations, but not a big part of my daily life now. So I ended up taking a Kaplan course, and I would definitely recommend taking a course rather than trying to do independent study. They are very expensive, but judging by the fact that a lot of this whole process is very expensive, so just think about the fact that taking this course can help you do well enough that you're not wasting another year of your life if you have to reapply or have to push everything back because of how you did on the MCAT. So that's a good investment. It's high yield for you to just put the money down, take a good structured course. There's something called, I'm sure there's new stuff now because I was applying back in 2010 and 2011. So I also use audio osmosis. So that's these CDs that you can listen to, and they talk about physics and all of that. And there's a bunch of other, there's similar resources, but mostly I did Kaplan, which also once you go to medical school and you're there, I just took my last step 3. So there's the licensing exam, step 1, step 2, step 3. I just took step 3, and you end up just doing question bank, question bank, question bank. So it's a good way to also prepare for medical school.
Awesome.
Oh, and also often biochemistry is not a required class. but for a lot of some medical schools it is, but definitely take biochemistry, especially if it's like later in the application cycle, so that grade may or may not actually show up on your transcript. But biochemistry is one of the most useful classes that you can take in preparation for medical school.
Awesome. So a lot of our students are starting now to look at work or volunteer experience while they're at community college. What kind of experiences should they be looking for, and how did you find yours?
Yeah, so I'm from a pretty rural area. There was a county hospital, and I just volunteered as a junior volunteer. Then in high school, then when I would come home in college, every vacation I would go and volunteer in the hospital. And then also, actually, once I was working and I was applying to medical school, I would take one day off every other week to drive down from San Francisco down to Monterey Bay to volunteer there. Because for me, what was really great about working in this area, make sure that when you do volunteer work, you're working for free. So what they're paying you with is experience. So make sure you're getting an educational experience. Otherwise, you're defeating the purpose of why you're there. And obviously, like, you have to make sure you fit your role, but the best way to do that is to make sure to be clear about what are the expectations of my role as a volunteer. Like, am I mostly just helping do clerical work, or is there any patient contact? I think patient contact is for you going to be the most beneficial of getting a sense of what medicine is like. Often if you round with the physicians, it's just a lot of talking, so that's cool too. But I think hanging out with the nurses and getting a sense of what people's stories are like gives you a better idea of the kinds of things you'll be dealing with, but also gives you good material to put in your application, like essays.
Cool. So one of our other questions, it's not on the list, but how did you choose your specialty in psychiatry?
Okay, so that's kind of down the road, but for me, a couple of things. I actually love surgery a lot, and it was actually my best rotation. I got the best grade in it, and I loved it. But I think that surgery is something that is all-consuming. You pretty much, if you want to do surgery, that's the only thing you can do. I'm very interested in doing research. And if I wanted to do research, I would have to do surgical research, which is very clinical, and I'm not very interested in that. I'm more interested in like practitioner, that kind of thing. And to me, in medicine, so medicine is like basically like what we kind of there's medicine in general, but then medicine is like internal medicine. So it's like cardiology, pulmonology, and all that stuff. What most people just consider a doctor. So that's like a lot of knowledge. You spend a lot of time looking at labs. And your physical exam is really important, but to me, what I love about psychiatry is that you really get to know the person. You can't get away from knowing a person and their hopes and their dreams and their interests and what's important to them. And to me, I ended up picking psychiatry because I really love knowing who you are and how you fit in the world, and also it's where some of the sickest, most disenfranchised people are. That's how I ended up at accounting program at LAC USC, because we work with some of like patients with really complex psychosocial situations and often a lot of disadvantages in life. And to me, there's something really amazing about that intimacy you get, where you get to talk to people about these like things that they sometimes don't share with anyone else, but you get to be a part of that and you get to help them in these moments. That's how I think like.
Can you give us a snapshot of what your schedule as a resident is like?
Okay, so I'm an intern. So this is the crap here. So basically, and it also depends on what your specialty is. So psych is known for, like, because of the way that psych illnesses work, they're more longitudinal. Their schedule is a little bit more reasonable, but in psychiatry, you do 6 months of medicine and then 6 months of inpatient psychiatry. So I did 2 months of pediatrics, 2 months of adult medicine, and 2 months of neurology. And those interspersed with them with like inpatient psych and then psych ED. And so my schedule basically, it depends. Like if I'm on medicine, I usually get up between 4 and 5 a.m. and I go to the hospital. I pre-round, that means I like look at all of my patients' vital signs, if they took their medications, and then I read the nursing notes and just make sure nothing crazy happened overnight. Then I go and see my patients before I go with the big team. I do a physical exam, I check all the labs and make sure everything is how they're doing, and then I prepare my presentation. Then once I've seen all of my patients, I and sometimes we have new patients overnight, so I have to like do an admission and like do all the, it's called H&P, a history and physical, kind of like why are you here and kind of the most salient stuff, and a more complete physical exam than the follow-up one. Then we do rounds. So often there's a lot of patients who will sit in a room and then talk about all of the patients, like what the findings are, what happened overnight, what were results, what did consultants say, and then we'll go and see the patient as a team. So often by the time the attending sees the patient, that patient has been seen by me, the intern. They've often been seen by the senior resident who's also on the team, and then we see them again with the attending. And then in the afternoon, I then like call consults, or I push for things. This is actually where your sister is amazing, super helpful. So she helps us a lot of these things, make sure things happen. And then I write my notes, and that's my day. So when I was in medicine, because I'm an intern, and the interns, we do the bulk of the work the first year, so all the footwork, I would often be working from around 5:30 to 6 to 5:30 to 6 in the evening. There's some rotations that are better. Internal medicine inpatient is one of the most brutal, so we have the worst hours, and I work 6 days with 1 day off. Then when I'm on like a different rotations, like on psych ED, if you're in the ED, you work shifts. So that means like I get in at 8 and I theoretically leave at 5, depending on when my last patient was that I saw, and I had weekends off. But that again just depends on the rotation.
Well, sounds like a lot going on in those shifts. So right now we have about like 10 minutes. I want to be respectful of your time to open up to questions from our students. If anyone has burning questions, raise your hand.
Bring them on.
I know y'all have questions.
I've heard that school that you graduated is important. Like they're saying, oh, if you graduated from UCLA and if you have bachelor from UCLA is better than. Is the school matter?
Yeah. So does the school matter for your bachelor's degree and for your medical degree? Yeah.
Yeah. So it depends. The short answer is it is easier if you went to a more prestigious school, purely because it already tells them something about like the quality of student you are. Does that mean that if you didn't go to that school, you don't stand a chance? Absolutely not. Like that is definitely not the case. But it's basically your pedigree. So it also depends on kind of what kind of career you're planning on having. If you want to do research and you want to be like have like a really big academic career, you want to be at like some of the bigger institutions, then they do care about pedigree. It's not nearly as bad as it is for like law jobs, but I think in medicine, it's what they care more about is your GPA and your MCAT score, and that's kind of the purpose of the MCAT, is to kind of be able to show that regardless of where you are, this assures them a certain quality of your knowledge.
Good question.
You mentioned you applied to multiple medical schools. I know each school has a different mission statement. Did you tailor your essays to their mission statement? Or
so I applied to a lot of medical schools. So a lot of them will have optional essays or will have additional essays. I always do the optional essay. And especially if there's something in your application that you need to explain, like longer periods of time off, if you had military experience or like grades that weren't too great or some sort of like academic action that was taken. But you have to do it in a way that makes you look good rather than like being like, oh, this is what happened. Because the reality is it's part of your story. So you need to be able to explain kind of what happened. So what I did is I had a couple of different essays, and if there were particular programs I was very interested in and there were specific things that I wanted to target, then I would talk about that. But I think the mission statements usually are generally kind of generic. Some of them are a little bit more different, but I think what they really want to hear is like, I want to go to this specific medical school because they have this specific thing, or they serve this population, or something like that, and that obviously will help you. But the practicality aspect, because there's a massive amount of essays that you have to write and things that you have to write that I personally did not end up writing different ones for each one. Even for residency when I was applying, For some of them, I'd be like, oh, okay, this is a particular thing that I really love about you, and I would add that to my essay. But I tried to write an essay that I could give to every program.
Anyone else? Any other questions about her experience, medical school? Going back to your post-bac, what was that like, and how did you choose the post-bac program?
So the short answer to how did I choose this post-bac program is that's the program I got into. I applied to a bunch, and that's the one that accepted me. I actually got off the wait list. So I started like 2 days after everyone else did. But it was like kind of like college in that it's basically college classes with a little bit more focus, and also it was pretty intense because I was taking a pretty science heavy schedule, but I had time to do research, so I did that. But I think the way that because you give up a lot when you're studying for the MCAT and when you're taking all these tests and studying. And so for me, when I was like, all my friends were going out, one of my friends even walked in there, he was like, how are you not done studying? Like, how much organic, haven't you already learned all of organic chemistry? I was like, no, you could literally get a PhD in this. Like, I'm at the very tippy tip. And so what I would tell myself is this worthwhile not getting into medical school for? And if the answer to that was no, then I stayed home and studied. If the answer to that was yes, then I went with that. But it kind of set a standard for my academic commitment, and it helped me kind of come to terms with a lot of stuff I was missing out on, just because that's the reality of life. But my postdoc experience is actually a lot easier than college because we had fewer classes, but ultimately the classes are pretty hard. So.
Anything else before we ask our last question? You guys know everything already about med school? All right. So if there are no last questions, we're gonna ask our last one. So looking back on your educational journey, what would you advise a community college student waiting to go to medical school?
I think that be honest with yourself about whether or not academically you have the grades and you have the scores, and if this is something that you really want. Because there are a lot of, it's the same way that like the way doctors are portrayed on television is the same way high school is portrayed on television, right? Like if you look at TV, high school on TV, they like never do homework, they never study for the SATs. And I think that's one of the most important things you can do for yourself as you kind of are standing at the precipice of plunging into this journey is, do you want this? And do you understand what you're getting yourself into? And I think one of the best ways to do that is to just get out there, volunteer, get patient exposure, and kind of get an idea of what it actually is and like what your role is as a physician, because I think there's a lot of old beliefs about like the kind of income that you can make. The reality is medical school is super expensive. So yeah, I'm a doctor, but I also have a ton of debt. And for me, that's okay because I love the work that I do. And I like eventually I'll make enough money, but it's not the same as it was in like the 70s or 80s. And also those people often had familial wealth that not everybody has. So I think ultimately really take some time to get exposure to the healthcare system and so that you have an understanding. And if you decide that becoming a doctor is not what you want, or you've applied a couple of times and it's just not working, just remember that there are other ways to be involved in the healthcare system. You don't have to be a doctor. Like a lot of people find nursing to be a better lifestyle or a more consistent with what they want or the role they want to play. And there's respiratory therapists, there's like IT people that work there, there's people who work for companies that go into the OR that help people with like whatever device that they have. And you can always decide later on, like, yeah, this is something I really want and plunge into it. But I think just as you're kind of trying to decide if this is what you want to do with your life, remember being a doctor isn't the only way to get involved. But also, if you want to be a doctor, go for it. Like, make those sacrifices, do what you need to do. In a lot of ways, it is extremely exciting. It is very rewarding. It's hard, but I love what I do, and I'm really lucky. And that was really important to me for when it comes to all the hard work that I have done, right? We've all been working hard since we're 6 years old. So, I'm lucky that I like my job, but work will always be work.
Thank you so much, Llang, for taking the time to speak with us. I know you're probably really busy and probably on your lunch break. So we just want to thank you so much for that. And if that's it, that concludes our workshop for today.
All right, thanks for inviting me, and thanks for your attention.
Oh, wait, we have one more question.
Oh, okay,
Yeah.
Good.
How did she balance work and school?
Oh, balancing work and school and maybe family life too?
Yeah, so I think with work, I worked in college, and then I worked when I was doing a post-bac, and then I worked when I was not in medical school. When you're in medical school, it is extremely hard to be successful at medical school and have an income. I do know some people who did some tutoring and were able to gain some income that way, but also there's very few, if any, scholarships, and also a lot of the graduate loans, they're like, and so that's like something to keep in mind, is that you can, but remember, ultimately you have to ask yourself, is this worthwhile not getting into medical school for? And the advice that I got from one of my mentors when I was applying is he said, don't trade like $20,000 or like $10,000 now, which sounds like a lot of money, for like $300,000 later. So you have to be able to delay that gratification. And I think also something that can be really hard in medical school, and I experience this too, is balancing home and family life with work. But I think it's also really important that your family experiences kind of the demands that there are on your life as a physician, but also as a student. And sometimes you have to put yourself first, and you have to be selfish, and you have to be able to like just say no to other people who need you. And that can be really, really hard. That being said, I know people who have children who've gone to medical school who look matched to our great physicians. I know people who had sick parents that they were taking care of. But just remember, when you're applying for these places, you're competing against people who don't have like they don't have those same duties. So they can put a lot more resources towards, studying for your STEP exam, studying for your MCAT. So just remember that.
Awesome. Thank you. All right. Well, have a great Memorial weekend.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye. Bye, everyone.